Hello, my name is Sarah Russell and welcome to this Facebook Live. Thank you for joining us. I am a clinical exercise specialist and I am here on behalf of Convatec today to present this Facebook Live to you about everything to do with hydration. So over my career, I have been incredibly interested in all things hydration. So particularly from a sporting perspective. So I've done a master's degree and a degree in sport and exercise science. I've studied exercise physiology, nutrition, hydration, and it's always been a really big interest because it's so important for sporting performance. I then had ileostomy surgery in 2010, and I realised how very important it was for anyone with an ileostomy. So this Facebook Live today is really to discuss all things hydration, whether you have a colostomy, an ileostomy, or a urostomy. And I'll be taking questions throughout. So please pop questions in the chat on the page and I'll try and get to them when I can. Here I am in my home in East Sussex. We have had a power cut this morning. So if we lose connection, just hang around and I'll try and get it back on track. And if it all goes to pot, then please rejoin us again on Wednesday at 6:30 when we'll be repeating this Facebook Live. So I've got some structure of the things that I'm going to talk about today, and then I'll try and get to questions. We've had some questions sent in to us already. So the first thing to just mention is that everything that I talk about in this Facebook Live today doesn't replace any advice or medical advice that you have been given from your clinician, your nurse, your doctor, or your medical team. The advice within this Facebook Live is really meant to be very general and really just to try and raise awareness of hydration. So anything specific, anything to do with you as an individual, please speak to your medical team. Okay, so let's get started. So first of all, Convatec have put together a great selection of resources for you. So there are a series of videos and there are a series of documents and pieces of information that you can get directly from Convatec about hydration. So first of all, we've got the hydration pack. This is available to download or to be sent out to you. There is this handy little pee chart which is looking at the colour of your urine, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more later. You can get your hydration, your drinks bottle, and there are lots of other video resources that you can watch, including a 20-minute workshop of slides narrated by myself to go through and actually learn a little bit more about the science behind good hydration. So let's talk about kind of my sort of philosophy on hydration is to aim for optimum hydration. This is not about trying to avoid dehydration. And I think those are two very different things. Because when we are optimally hydrated, we can feel really healthy, we can feel well, we feel energized, we feel ready to exercise, and we can live a really active, normal life. Now, as we sort of move towards the summer, when the weather's starting to get a bit warmer, I know the last few months it's been, unseasonably warm. And that's when dehydration just starts to creep in a little bit, when maybe find we're not drinking enough. Particularly at the moment when we're at home, those of you who are shielding at home, who are maybe working from home, your routines changed a little bit. You might find that your drinking habits and eating habits have changed a little bit as well. And that can just knock everything off kilter. The sort of signs of being, I suppose, not optimally hydrated are things like a headache, feeling groggy, feeling fatigued, just feeling a bit off, really. Maybe feeling a little bit dizzy as well. So those are kind of general symptoms of just feeling dehydrated. Now, we often put those down to other things, but actually just drinking a little bit more can help us feel a lot better. So how do you achieve optimum sort of hydration, if you like? And it's slightly different for people with an ileostomy versus a colostomy and a urostomy, and I'll explain why. People with an ileostomy, obviously, we lose a lot more fluid from our ileostomy bag throughout the day. So a typical body will lose around 2 to 2.5 litres of fluid over a normal day. When you have an ileostomy, you can lose a further sort of 600 to 800 mils of fluid from the stoma bag, or even more, on a daily basis. So it's really important to try and make sure that you're staying on top of that. So my theory is this concept of staying one step ahead of dehydration, rather than getting into this kind of feeling of grogginess and headache and fatigue. So people with an ileostomy have probably the most complex hydration needs. That doesn't mean to say that people with a colostomy and a urostomy don't need to think about their hydration needs as well. For people with a urostomy, what I've often seen there is people will often avoid drinking because they then have to deal with empty bags. So people can get quite dehydrated and feel quite unwell without really realising. And it's this conscious sort of drinking pattern where you maybe sort of forget to drink or choose not to drink as much as you should, because you don't want to have to empty the bag. And that's normal. We see that in people with urostomy. So being aware of that is a really good starting point. So how do you know if you're drinking enough? Let's just think of that as a general starting concept. The best way of knowing whether you're drinking enough is really to look at your urine colour. It is only part of the picture. So if we think about our urine colour, and you can get this card from Convatec, or you can download it, but we're aiming for a kind of pale straw colour urine. If it's darker than that, if it's yellowy, if it's kind of heading more into these darker colours, then it's a sign you're probably not drinking enough. Now, most people say, well, I've got quite dark urine when I wake up first thing in the morning, and that is normal. But what we want to try and avoid is there's peaks and troughs of light and dark urine throughout the day. So aiming for straw-coloured urine is a really good way of knowing whether you're drinking enough. If it's dark and maybe there's an odour to it, or you're not urinating very often during the day, then there's a chance that you're probably not drinking enough. What we don't want is very, very clear urine, because actually that could mean you're drinking too much fluid. So by drinking too much fluid, and particularly too much water, you're just flushing the electrolytes out of your body, and that's not a good thing either. So there's a happy balance of trying to sort of achieve this pale straw-coloured urine. Now, use that in conjunction with any signs and symptoms of not being optimally hydrated. So those are things like feeling fatigued, having a headache, feeling thirsty, bit groggy. Those sorts of symptoms are typical dehydration symptoms. So that in conjunction with darker urine are signs you need to drink more. Now, what to drink is the next big question. Now, a lot of people with an ileostomy, a lot of people who've had any kind of stoma surgery are often recommended to drink sports drinks and to drink electrolytes, drinks at Mark solution or Diarrhelite, and there's a wide range of choice, and it is incredibly complicated and confusing. So I'm going to try and unpick a little bit of that. So if you've got any questions on this, pop them in the chat, and we'll kind of talk about this now around what the best drinks are and how much of them to try and drink. So the first thing I'll say here is that everybody is different. Everybody has different hydration needs. So there is not a one size fits all. I cannot say everyone has to drink 2 litres of water per day, because that's going to be different for everybody. It will also differ depending on your situation from day to day. So on a particularly warm day where you maybe have been out in the garden, or you've done some physical activity, or you've been for a walk or done some exercise, that is very different to a cool day where you maybe haven't been anywhere or done much exercise. So your hydration needs are different each day, and they're different from person to person. So use your symptoms to drive how much you drink and be responsive to that, rather than setting yourself a target of 2 litres or whatever it might be in a day. Be more intuitive and responsive to how you feel, rather than setting yourself a target, because it's going to be different every day. So different types of drinks. Now, there's a huge range of different types of drinks. The most important thing for a drink to be well absorbed into the body is it needs an element of sodium and it needs an element of glucose within the drink. Now, this is the theory that all sports drinks are based on, because they're then going to be better absorbed into the body and improve performance. Now, we need to apply the same principle when we're trying to rehydrate our bodies or aim for this optimum hydration when we're living with the stoma. So we need to choose a drink that has got this glucose and sodium balance. Now, different drinks will have different amounts. Often, people, particularly with an ileostomy, are recommended to drink isotonic drinks. So that would be something like Lucozade Sport, or there's a known brand version here from the supermarket. Now, those sorts of drinks are actually very high in sugar and actually quite low in sodium. So we probably don't want to be using them on a daily basis because not great for health, too much sugar, and not great for weight gain. So what do we choose if we're not going to choose one of those? They're fine if you get into trouble, if you're feeling a bit groggy and that's all you've got, then it can be a sort of pick-me-up, but it's probably not a day-to-day choice. My feeling is that most people with an ileostomy or people with colostomies and neurostomies who maybe struggle a little bit with their hydration will benefit from an oral rehydration solution such as Diarrhelite, or making up something yourself. Now, with Diarrhelite, this has got the optimum balance of sodium and glucose. And what that does, it pulls the fluid molecule into your body and improves absorption. So you actually end up needing to drink less fluid overall because you've got this balance of sodium and glucose in the drink to help your body absorb it. So Diarrhelite, make it up exactly as the packet says, 1 sachet to 200 mils of water. I start the morning every day with 400 mils of Diarrhelite. That sets me up for the day. And then depending on what I'm doing, depending on how the weather is, I will then adjust that depending on how I'm feeling and what I need. If it's a really hot day and I'm doing a lot of exercise, I'll drink a lot more. And some days I can even do maybe a litre of Diarrhelite in a day. So you've kind of almost got different ends of the spectrum. So if you think about a sort of sugary sports drink at one end, and then you've got Diarrhelite at the other, and then you've got lots of other sort of things in the middle. Making up St. Mark's solution is often recommended to people with stomas as well. St. Mark's solution's got a lot more sodium than Diarrhelite does. I tend to use St. Mark's solution if I'm feeling particularly groggy and I need to get myself back on track really quickly. In one of our other Convatec videos, I've done a demonstration how to make St. Mark's solution. But if you just Google it, you'll find the sort of the ingredients online and how to make it up. Make it up into a litre jug, keep it in the fridge, and just kind of drink that as and when you need it, and drink that sort of throughout the day. So we want to be probably choosing some kind of electrolyte drink most days, along with mixed fluids. So what that means is tea, coffee, squash, juice, milkshakes, all those sorts of things all contribute towards your fluid intake. The interesting thing with tea and coffee is certainly weaker coffee, very, very strong coffee we'll just put to one side for it, but tea and coffee on the whole are part of your fluid intake. So they will hydrate you more than they will dehydrate you despite the caffeine intake. So they're included. So that's really important to remember that. But if that balance of drinks isn't quite enough for you, then try to look for some kind of electrolyte drink. As I said, so Diarrhelite is probably the go-to choice. It's convenient. You can carry the sachets around with you. Sometimes it's recommended to make double strength Diarrhelite. Now, what that means is that's 2 sachets into 200 mils of water. So it's double the strength that it's recommended. The slight issue with that is whilst it increases the sodium levels to the level of St. Mark's solution, it also increases the sugar level. So I would only do that on very sort of exceptional circumstances when I didn't have St. Mark's solution, or I was feeling, particularly unwell, or I'd gotten myself a little bit more dehydrated than normal. The idea really though is to try and stay one step ahead of this kind of feeling like that in the first place. So drinking those sorts of drinks will stop you getting to that point. So what else do I need to talk about? These sorts of things are quite popular. So you can get little tablets that you pop into water, and they are often very high in sodium, very high in electrolytes, but actually they don't have any glucose in them. So remember, we need the right balance of glucose and sodium to then combine to help hydrate you. So whilst they've got electrolytes in them, because they don't have sodium, they probably won't be absorbed terribly well. So please do pop any questions in the chat there on any kind of drinks or electrolyte drinks or thoughts you've got about that. Right, so thinking about your individual needs on a day-to-day basis, as your environment changes, you need to be kind of alert to your changing environment and your changing hydration needs on a daily basis. So when it gets warmer, if you're on holiday, if you're doing some physical activity, if you're kind of in the garden doing some digging, or maybe you don't have access to a drink, those are often times where you lose that window and then maybe start to sort of realize you haven't had a drink for quite a while and maybe start to feel a bit thirsty. So watch out for things like that, where things start to change around you. So I know, just watching my husband over the last few weeks, he's been working at home, and I've noticed that he's not been drinking as much, and he's waking up with a headache the next morning. His daily routine has changed, and that's impacted his drinking habits that he's had for the last 20 years working in an office. So that's changed for him. So one thing we found has really helped him is having a bottle with these kind of markers on it. And it just says every 2 hours sort of how much you should be sort of drinking, and it's got this little good job message at the bottom to sort of just provide a bit of motivation. So little tips like that can be really useful. So he now fills this up and he has it next to him by his desk, and that really helps just keep him on track and keep him motivated to drink throughout the day. So having a bottle with you, having a glass with you, just having reminders on your phone, things like that to keep you on track. So that can be a really big help as well. If you're going out for a walk, make sure you take a drink with you. Make sure you take, I use a Camelback with a backpack with a sort of tube to take a drink that way. Or you can have like a, some kind of bum bag with a holder in for your bottle. So I'll just talk about athletes a little bit more and sport a little bit more as well. So what's really important with exercise and with sport is to be well hydrated before you start. So often people worry about what to drink during their exercise. What's more important is to be well hydrated in the 12 hours or 24 hours leading up to that your exercise session or your run or your walk or whatever it might be. So you then will need to drink less during the session because you've drunk, you're well hydrated before you start. So pre-hydrating the night before, maybe with 400 mils of diarrhea, and just making sure that you're well on track and you're well ahead of your hydration before you go and start your exercise. So that's really, really important. And what I've found with a lot of people who are athletes over the years is they probably just don't drink anywhere near as much as they think. It took me probably about 2 years to kind of really work out a strategy. And that strategy for me is very much around using Diarrhea and using it on a daily basis to keep my hydration levels as optimum as possible, so I'm ready then to exercise when I need to. Okay, so other things that you can access through the Convatec website. We've created this, this is a longer kind of hydration article. And there's a lot more information, a lot more science in this. So if you want a bit more information, you want to sort of dig into the detail, you can download this directly from the website. And also an article we published in the Gastrointestinal Nursing Journal, along with Caroline Ridoni, who is our Director of Nursing. This was published a few years ago. And that just really kind of explains a lot about what I've been talking about today. So we've got a few questions that have been sent in advance. So I'll just go through some of those now. And then, but please do pop your questions in the chat, and I'll just hopefully see if I can see those there. Okay, right. So somebody says, I've recently had ileostomy surgery, but I've had no guidance on the best way to stay hydrated. I used to be very good at staying hydrated, but do I have to do anything differently now I've got the stoma? So it kind of depends on how much output you've got from your ileostomy. So if your ileostomy is quite watery, or you've got quite a high output, then you really do need to kind of be a bit more sort of conscientious about making sure your hydration needs are being met. So I would say probably start with some Diaryte. Do speak to your stoma nurse or your doctor or your surgeon, your medical team. But it is something to use. And the thing with Diaryte is, don't think about it as medicine or something to kind of treat you once you get dehydrated. Think about using it as something to prevent dehydration sort of becoming set in the first place. So using Diaryte is a sort of preemptive process rather than a treatment, if that makes sense. So yes, new ileostomy patients, really focus on hydration, avoid drinking gallons of plain water, aim for a mixed fluid intake, and choose a drink that has got some electrolytes in it. Ideally, make up St. Mark's solution or drink Diaryte, or there's another product called SOS Rehydrate, which is a great product to try as well. Lucozade Sport, the sort of isotonic drinks I've talked about, the issue with them, if you remember, too much glucose, not enough sodium. So that balance is not quite right. So, okay from, on occasions, but probably not enough, too much sugar on a daily basis. Okay. The next question, I am a keen runner and want to run a marathon, but I'm really worried about staying hydrated. Are gels okay to use, or do I need to use something else? Okay, so the sort of things that they're talking about there is when you do marathon or long exercise, you can get like a sort of gel in a sachet. Now, all that does is provides energy. So that will just provide a boost of carbohydrate, energy to help keep your energy levels up. It won't do anything for your hydration. In actual fact, in someone without a stoma, those gels can actually cause dehydration, because what happens is the body pulls fluid into the gut to try and then dilute it. So they're not amazing. I tend not to use them. And also that very high concentration of sugar tends to, not in everybody, but tends to increase stoma output. So gels won't do anything for your hydration. You need to focus on getting your hydration right. So in a marathon, I would use SOS Rehydrate, or I would use Diaryte as my main hydration source. Occasionally a little bit of water, but really very, very little, because you need that optimum absorption of the fluid. Are there any foods that can help with hydration? So yeah, absolutely. We get fluid from food. So particularly things like soup, fruit and vegetables, foods that have got high water concentration, that will aid your hydration levels as well. So you don't have to get everything from actual drinking fluids. You will get some fluids from your food as well. How can I tell if I'm dehydrated? So we've talked about that already. If you're feeling very unwell and your urine is, incredibly dark down this end here, please do speak to your doctor or speak to a clinician and just get some advice. The only time I've been admitted for an IV drip was when I got flu and I just couldn't keep on top of my hydration levels. So, if you've got a fever, if you're particularly unwell, and you're very dehydrated, you may need a little bit more than just, maintenance at home. So speak to your medical team and just get some help if you feel very dehydrated. That said, most people are kind of going around in this slightly chronically dehydrated place a lot of the time. And I think a lot of people can feel a lot better. So hydration is a spectrum. It's not one thing or another. We're either optimally hydrated or we're not, very, very dehydrated and about to be put in hospital. Most people are in the middle somewhere most of the time. and it's about shifting that slider a little bit more towards the optimum hydration end. I have a urostomy, and there doesn't seem to be much guidance out there in terms of hydration. Do you have any tips? So with a urostomy, when your bladder is diverged or removed and you have a urostomy bag, your hydration needs aren't any different in terms of you're not losing fluid unless you've got an ileostomy as well. But like I said earlier, what we found with a lot of people with urostomies is they will often forget to drink, or they will subconsciously choose not to drink because they don't want to have to deal with going to the toilet and emptying their bag more frequently. And it becomes a little bit of a habit. So just being aware of that and thinking about, does that apply to me? Do I feel like I'm maybe not drinking as much as I should? But you know, you should be able to just drink as normally. For most people, even with marathon runners that I coach who don't have stomas, I recommend that they drink electrolyte drinks like Diarylight or SOS Rehydrate as part of their strategy to maintain optimum hydration. So with a urostomy, if you choose a drink with electrolytes in it, you will absorb more of it into your body, more of the fluid into your body, and there'll be less going through into your bag. So try it and experiment and see. Right, okay. My stoma nurse told me to increase my sodium intake to help with my hydration, but didn't tell me the best way of doing this apart from salt, which I don't want to do for obvious reasons. So the thing with, just to explain very briefly about sodium and salt, salt is sodium chloride. So it actually is two elements. So it's made up, so when you look at how much salt is in something, sodium is around just slightly less than half of that amount. So, for example, if we look at this jar of pizza topping here, so something that's pre-made, foods that are pre-made will often be quite high in salt and in sodium. This jar has got 3.6 grams of salt. Now, there'll be calculators online to work out actually how much sodium that is. Now, the recommended amount of salt per adult in the UK is around 6 grams per day. So this jar, if you were to eat this whole jar, which you wouldn't because it would be spread over a couple of pizzas, but if you were to eat that whole jar, you'd be over 50% of your salt intake for the day. So what I'm sort of saying here is choose foods which are kind of more natural, less processed foods, but get your sodium and salt intake from your hydration, because that's going to help you improve your fluid better and absorb your fluid into your body, if that makes sense. So 1 sachet of Diarylight has got 0.6 grams of salt. So that is basically 1/10 of your daily intake. So if you don't get your salt as much from processed foods, you can get that intake from your hydration, and that's much better in terms of getting your hydration on track, because you need that salt in your drink to help you absorb the fluid. Right, I'm just going to have a quick look to see if there's any comments down here on the. Okay, great. So if you have questions, please do pop them in there. I'm just trying to read them through. Okay. I didn't realize you could drink so much and flush out electrolytes. Yeah, absolutely. And in actual fact, for runners and for people in marathons and things, those are that's something called hyponatremia, where you become low in sodium. Right, I'm just having a couple of issues. Yeah, someone just said there about Lucozade, and that's great. If it works for you, then that's absolutely fantastic. As I say, everyone's got different needs. So, you know, on an occasion, then that's absolutely great. So it's finding what works for you. Is it St. Mark's if it's not cold? Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I've got loads of comments here. My computer's not too happy. Okay, let's see. Would I recommend using electrolyte drinks every day, standard with an ileostomy? That's a really good question. Would you recommend having an electrolyte drink every day with an ileostomy? even though you maybe feel like you don't need it? Really good question. Be guided by your pee colour, by your symptoms, by how you feel, by how much output you've got. If you haven't got very, very high output from your ileostomy, you've got a really well-behaved stoma, and you know your pee is a really good colour, then probably not. There was a piece of research done though that showed that most people with an ileostomy are showing some clinical signs of dehydration, even though they don't have symptoms. So you may find that you feel a little bit better if you try something, but always have it on hand, just in case you need it, just in case you feel a little bit unwell. Is it okay to drink St. Mark's if it's not cold? If it's just room temperature, yeah, absolutely. It's just people prefer the taste of it in the fridge. Okay, should a teenager have a diarolyte daily? Again, it depends on what you can get him to tolerate. You might find just making up some Ribena and popping a little bit of salt in that might, he prefer the taste of that, or even Lucozade, but maybe pop a little bit more sodium in there. So yeah, so try that. So question here, wondering why I feel really tired in the morning and struggle to wake. Is this dehydration? I'm currently in a tropical country. I'd say probably yes. And look at the colour of your urine when you wake up in the morning as well. So if it's very dark and it's very different, then yeah, quite possibly. So try Diarolyte or St. Mark's or SOS Rehydrate, or something that's going to boost those electrolytes. Because remember, it's not just the sodium you're replacing, you're using sodium to help you absorb the fluid. All I'll say is try it and see if that helps you feel a bit better. So it's very much about sort of exploring it yourself and seeing what you need. Okay, questions coming. So as we get older, I think we don't get thirst. What happens as we age is we lose our kind of thirst, our sensation of thirst. So using thirst as your only measure of whether you need to drink isn't so great, particularly as we get older. So kind of having a planned drinking strategy is really good. And you almost need to drink before you get overly thirsty, and have a sort of a pattern of drinking. So having, something like this to kind of give you reminders, or just have a water bottle around, drink it with you, carry it around with you and drink with you. So yeah, absolutely, that is correct. Oh gosh, 10 questions, let's see. My computer isn't terribly happy, but anyway, let's see what I can mend. Would I recommend ORS hydration tablets? Yes, so I think you were talking about these ones. Just on the side there. Yeah, these aren't bad actually. I've tried them before. They don't quite have the same balance as Diarolyte, but they're not bad at all. And it's all about having the right amount of glucose and sodium, and that's something called osmolarity, and that's what oral rehydration solutions are. So Diarolyte, St. Mark's solution, and SOS are really the only three. And this isn't a bad option. Actually, they're not too bad. Those are slightly different to these, which don't have glucose in them. So yeah, those aren't bad actually. Lynn says, really interesting about the Diarolyte. What in particular? Okay, let me just scroll through these questions here. So I used to get Diarolyte on prescription. NHS are pulling back from that now. Would you need to push for it? That's obviously just have a discussion with your GP. I do get mine on prescription, and I think it's not an expensive thing, and maybe get half on prescription and buy the rest yourself, or make up St. Mark's solution, which is obviously the cheaper way of doing it, and then use Diarolyte for when you're out and about. But that's a conversation to have with your GP. But yes, Diarolyte is available on prescription, and actually SOS Rehydrate is also available now on prescription. and that is actually a sports drink, but it's aimed at people. It's exactly the same makeup sort of recipe as Diarylight, and it's an oral rehydration solution. So that's a really good option as well. So SOS Rehydrate. If urine colour is dark, should we drink lots of water in one go to get it paler, or spread it out? Yeah. So really good question. If you have dark urine and then you just go and gulp a load of water, you're going to fill your bladder with water, and it's not absorbing into the tissues in your body. So you'll have clear urine, but it won't actually be a sign that you're very well hydrated, which is why urine colour is only one part of the jigsaw. So yes, try and, if you get very dark urine, I would then try and find something with electrolytes in it. So your Diarylight, your St. Mark's, something to try and get absorption of the fluid into your body more optimal. And then see if your urine colour starts to gradually get paler. So yeah, if you just go from very dark to very pale, you've just drunk a lot of water, filled your bladder. We want to try and get it into the body as much as possible. I hope that helps. Lots of questions. Keep the questions coming. This is really good. My computer's not very happy. Okay, so another question that we got sent in advance was will I be able to tell from my output if I'm dehydrated? So that's a really interesting question. So if you've got very watery output, or you've got a lot of excess output, you can become quite dehydrated. So, you know, if your output is very high, you're emptying your bag maybe 8 to 10 times a day, and it's very, very watery, then that is definitely a conversation to have with your stoma nurse, with your gastroenterologist, with your medical team, to look at how you can modify your output, how you can slow that down in some way, but also then to make sure you're choosing the right drinks to optimize that. So that's a slightly more, you know, a question really to sort of get some more help from your medical team. But just looking at your output on its own, that won't be a sign of dehydration, but how much output you've got is a sign that you could potentially become more dehydrated. So if it's a hot day, you know, your diet's changed, you've got very watery output, then you could potentially be at risk of becoming dehydrated. So yeah, keep an eye on that. And I'm just going to see if I can get this to work. Okay. So for some reason that's not very happy. Oh, I'll see if I can find them on my phone. Okay. What else? Okay. I want to keep on top of my hydration, but I find then at night my output is high, and I having to get up to go to the toilet a lot. It's a vicious cycle. So yeah, that sounds really difficult and quite challenging. So output and hydration are kind of connected, but they're also kind of not. So making sure that you drink enough to stay well hydrated, but then you're not getting up all night to go to the toilet is really important. But drinking the right drink should help your body absorb the fluid better and reduce your output. So something too sugary could potentially increase your output. Right, I'm going to bring up the questions on my phone because my computer isn't very happy, so just bear with me for a second. Right, let's see. Right, there we go. So, I have an ileostomy. I have a litre of St. Mark's solution every day. What other cold drink should I use to get my 2 litres per day? So again, it depends on how you feel. A litre of St. Mark's a day may well be absolutely enough for you, combined with other mixed fluids, so tea, coffee, juices, squash, whatever else you have. Remember, we don't need to try and aim to have 2 litres of fluid per day. it depends on your own individual needs. So some people will need 1.5 litres, some people might need 4 litres. It depends on your activity levels, on the temperature, the weather, your activities, and what other things you've been doing. So remember, we don't just need to aim for a set amount, we need to be responsive to how we feel. So if you feel well, your urine is a good colour, and you are, you're not showing any signs of that grogginess, headache, then you probably don't need to change what you're doing too much. So let's see if we've got any more comments coming through. Okay, so really good, again, question here about high blood pressure. If you have got high blood pressure or you've had a history of heart disease and your doctor has suggested you keep a low sodium intake, that is obviously a question to discuss with your doctor. However, what I would say is the presence of sodium in the drink is really important to help your absorption of the fluid and hydration levels. So sodium is linked to blood pressure and it's linked to fluid balance. So you need some sodium. We can't exist on 0 sodium. So try and get your sodium from other places. So instead of having sort of, things like this, which would have high sodium in them, if you're getting your salt from your fluid drinks, from your fluids, then that's the best place to try and, get your allocation, if you like. So that, again, is a really difficult question, but probably one more for your medical team to discuss that with. But I'll say I would try and reduce your intake of processed foods as much as you possibly can, and get your sodium from the fluids, because that's really important to help with your hydration. Right, let's see if there's any more questions coming through. Okay. Can the symptoms of tinnitus can be affected by dehydration, such as dizziness? Caroline's answered that. Thank you, Caroline. What's the best tasting product you use? Either taste something like blackcurrant, and does it taste salty? I tend to like a flavoured blackcurrant version of Diarrhea. It's finding something you enjoy the taste of. And yes, it probably does taste quite salty to begin with, but it's something to kind of work on, to kind of tolerate, because it really does make a big difference. So initially you might drink it and go, do you know what, this is grim, I don't like the taste of it at all. But for me, it's around, if that makes me feel better, then I will drink that, because I know I'm going to feel more energized and I'm going to feel better, and I'll feel better later on. If that makes sense. So I am struggling with my computer here. So what we are going to do is try and answer all of these questions throughout the day on this forum. So I'll come back to here and pop answers into everyone's questions. I really hope that's been useful. I really hope you have you found that helpful, hopefully not confusing. It is a very individual thing. So you need to find your own personal strategy that's right for you. There isn't a prescription, there isn't a one size fits all. So what you have to try and do is find the hydration strategy that works for you. And what might be right on Monday isn't the same as what might be right on Friday. So there's another question just popped up. Oh, they're working now. What about the Oxford solution? Okay, that's really interesting. I've not seen much about that. I've looked at it once, I've seen it come up, and it's very, very high in sugar. So I think it's 200 mils of squash, 800 mils of water, and a teaspoon or more of salt. I've made it up and tried it. It is very, very high in sugar. So I'm not sure about the osmolarity, and I haven't looked into it in too much detail. I'd probably go St. Mark's solution over sort of squash, but make up squash to taste and add maybe half a teaspoon of salt into, say you've got a 500 ml bottle, half a teaspoon, and make squash to taste. Now that's not exactly the same as an oral rehydration solution, but it's better than nothing. Right, okay. So I am going to wrap up now. I'm going to come back and answer some of the questions that I can. Sorry that they haven't been scrolling through probably as they should. So as I was saying, hydration is very personal. You have to try and find your own hydration strategy. Remember, choosing mixed fluids is really important, but having fluids that include sodium and glucose, which is something called the sodium glucose co-transport system. And what that does, it pulls the fluid molecules into your body and helps you absorb the fluid and improves hydration. So we want to, particularly if you've got osteotomy, you want to probably try and avoid gallons of plain water, choose mixed fluids, and have some kind of electrolyte on a daily basis, probably. But see how you feel. Everything is around how you feel. So be very intuitive, tune into how you feel. Don't accept grogginess and having a headache as the normality, because you could probably feel a lot better if you just tweak your hydration a little bit. If those symptoms persist, then obviously go and see your GP and look at investigating where they're coming from. But once you've ruled out any other issues, if you've got those sorts of symptoms, then think about tweaking your hydration sort of strategy and seeing if you can improve things. As I say, it took me about 2 years to kind of work out what I needed to do and what made me feel better. And that for me is using Diarylyte as a sort of preventative strategy rather than a reactive treatment strategy. So hopefully this has been helpful. I'll get to those questions. We're going to repeat this again on Wednesday evening at 6:30. And just a reminder that everything that I've talked about in here isn't a replacement for medical advice you might get from your stoma nurse or your doctor, but I hope there's been some nuggets of information and something that has helped you. If you need further advice, then please do contact our stoma nurse helpline, and they can advise you on hydration as well. And contact our Me Plus team on this number here and on the website, and they can send out to you the hydration pack, and you can download these documents from the website as well, and follow the workshop that we've created and the other videos that are on the Convatec website. So I hope you've enjoyed it, and thank you for joining and listening, and bye.